This video brought to you by Barnett, manufacturers of the finest American-made clutches since 1948. Find a clutch for your bike at barnettclutches.com and feel the Barnett difference.
Ciao, buongiorno. Kris Keefer, RacerXOnline.com. How are you guys doing? Welcome to Italy. Such an awesome experience here today. You're looking at, that's right, the red Ducati Desmo450 MX. Man, what a ride. We've been waiting a long time for this. This thing has been in the works since 2021. So I might know something about a startup motorcycle. It is not easy to do. It is a very hard work to do. Coming into a sport that you may not know a lot about, but you know what? When it comes to Ducati, I'm sure you guys have nothing to worry about. We got a chance, just a little snippet of what they're doing at the factory, and it is a very, very cool experience. If you've never seen an assembly line, if you get a chance, I'd recommend it. It is, I guess us as motorcycle riders, we forget each little part that goes into building what we ride on the weekend. So had a chance to visit the factory just for a little bit. It was an honor, and lots of cool things. What I think about Ducati, there's a lot of passionate people. What they really worry about is quality. They really want their bikes to be quality and to be pushed out the door, and they want you, the customer, to almost be taken care of before you leave the dealership. They talked about what they can do at the dealership. They can even adjust your spring rate. They want you to leave there with the sag set. So they're really looking forward to you guys getting into the Ducati dealerships and really honing in on what you guys want for you Ducati Desmo. So instead of getting into the Desmo valve train, we're going to have a whole separate video about that when we get back home and the technical details of this motorcycle. Look, you came here to know exactly what this thing is like to ride. We only had one day here at Park 04, so this is actually a really cool track for me. I've been to Italy a few times. Typical Italian track, has some hills, hard packed clay, but it's good enough to give you guys a feel on what this bike is like. So straight away, the Desmo valve train, I'm sure you hear everyone talk about that. There's a lot of media here today, and you're going to hear a lot about that. So I did hear a lot of guys talk today about how different the bike feels. Well, for me personally, I don't think this engine package is drastically different than other 450 motocrossers out there right now. So the thing that this valve train does, this Desmo system, is it has a very, very free rev spool up. And if you guys don't know what that is, it just goes through the power very, very quick. And unlike other engines that do that, this doesn't actually rev out. You don't have to short shift it. So if I could give you guys an example, the Yamaha is very easy spool up. It revs really quick, but you have to shift it. It doesn't rev out very far. So the 450 Desmo actually will pull. This rev cut is at 11,900. That is crazy amounts of power for a 450. Going to 11,900 RPM, that is very far. Do you guys need to go that high? No. I'm sure the MotoGP bikes you guys hear, they're at 20,000 RPM. So Ducati thought 11,900 RPM is in the safe zone for you guys, the customer. They also talked about how long the engine lasts. Antonio Caroli's out here pounding laps. They take exactly what he does RPM-wise on the track. They get this motor out, they go back to the engine dyno, and then they go to work on durability. Exactly what he rides like out here on the track, that goes to the dyno, and that stays on that dyno for several hours. So high levels of durability within this, 60 hours for a piston and then 45 hours for checking your valves. That is a very long time for a 450 that revs really high. They're claiming 60 horsepower on this engine, 39.5 foot-pounds of torque. So what you guys need to know about a Ducati Desmo is it is a very linear power. It's not going to rip your arms off like a Yamaha YZ450. It's very linear, very smooth, and very long. I do think that second and third gear could be a little bit closer together, but unlike a YZ450, you're not going to be able to run third gear in corners. This bike likes to be downshift to second. it'll reward you if you do that. So getting into a corner, downshifting the second, and letting this thing eat a long time down the straightaway is its strong suit. So you will not have to worry about shifting to third. You just have to physically remember, like, hey, this isn't your normal 450. I do have to downshift the second, and this will reward you. Similar to like when you have an engine that spools up very quickly and very free, at times I can get some vibration. And I'm very sensitive to vibration. So when I got on this bike, I was a little bit worried looking at the frame, thinking about how high it revved. There was no vibration through my hands and through my feet. That gives me a quality feel when I'm out on the track. And that is a key thing for me. I hate nothing more when I have a brand new bike, I get on the track, and it just vibrates. It feels like it's 60 hours old. I just don't like it. This Ducati doesn't have that feeling. When I rode around here today, it took me a little while to get used to the track. It is clay-based. It is loose. You would think, man, I'm going to break rear-end traction. This bike has a ton of rear wheel feel. They have traction control, and there is a new way they're doing that. We're going to talk about that in our technical details video that will come up here shortly. But for me, the traction control is not needed. I'm not a huge TC guy, but when they were explaining it to us, they did it a different way. Again, a different video, we'll have that. Unlike other models, with traction control on, it upsets the ride attitude of the motorcycle when I'm jumping. This machine with traction control on doesn't do that. Granted, I don't think this power lends you to using traction control. Very slippery at the end of the day here, and this engine by itself without traction control is very linear, easy to use, and for me, it's simply not needed. But if you decide to use it, it builds its power a different way around the track. So I like that. I wouldn't normally use TC on other bikes. I may use this on certain Southern California tracks, or may even try some stuff when I go to Georgia. So for me, a unique way to use TC, but otherwise, if you're looking for an engine just to build a lot of front side and a ton of low end just snap, this isn't your type of engine. It builds RPMs really quickly, but very linear, very long, and it revs to the moon. A couple things to note. Second to third gear shifting is a little bit tough. I have to really use the clutch to get into third. So for me, I would like a little bit more of a seamless shifting from second to third. It's a little bit notchy. There's a big uphill coming up here today, and after you get into that rut and you're starting to, accelerate up the hill, I had to really use the clutch to get into third gear. Another thing that was a little bit touchy, a lot of low-end RPM situations around this track on top of the hills, getting the shallow ruts. 0 to 10% throttle opening, a little bit rich for me. So once you're past that point, very connected, really easy and linear like we mentioned. But for me, I would just like to clean that up a little bit. They will have a phone app. You can get on your phone, download the app, and you can control your engine braking, some power delivery within that app. So there's a map 1 and map 2, which is a red and green map. I went to a red map, which is more aggressive. I had the guys from Ducati turn the engine braking down, and that actually helped that rich low-end feeling from 0 to 10% throttle opening. So if you guys end up getting that, use that app and turn that engine braking down. It really livens up the engine even more, helps the chassis when you come into corners. And then if you feel that 0 to 10% rich feel, going to that less engine braking will help you. So that is just something for you guys to note. I also think I was worried about chassis being rigid. Can't give you a ton of information about chassis here. We don't have very rough conditions. It's not a very fast track. There's one hill going up, and then there's a little bit of a straightaway coming back down. But otherwise, the chassis itself doesn't feel rigid here. That doesn't necessarily mean it won't feel rigid at other spots where we go to in Southern California, or even when I go to Georgia. I just can't give you a firm answer on that yet. But I will say this. It is a very neutral feeling bike. There's a front end steering bike. There's a rear end steering bike. This does both really well. Here in Italy, you can steer with your rear around the outside of some berms, and then you got to dive into some shallow ruts on top of hills. There is enough front wheel traction. There is enough front wheel feel. I do feel like this is a very well balanced motorcycle. It has Showa suspension. The thing that's unique about the Showa suspension, Hide from Showa was here today. It has a 4.6 rear spring. You heard that right. It's not a 5.6, a 4.6. So what that tells me is that linkage ratio is steep. There's a steep curve on that linkage ratio, but I do feel like high-speed dampening, the quality of that in-stroke is just not there. A lot of jumps to flat or low landings today, and then in-stroke feel for me was a little bit empty, so I had to go in on the high speed to kind of control that. And then once I did that, it really put more weight on that front end and helped my front end steering a little bit. So I did prefer that. I played with fork height a little bit. We decided on 5 millimeters here today. I did go in on 2 on the compression on the fork. That helped balance as well. But overall, I feel like the Showa spec is a little bit softer, which is to be expected. A lot of European testing here on small chop, a hard pack here in Italy when they test. I understand that they're looking for comfort. So I expect when we get home with this bike, I might need to do a little bit more work with the suspension. But overall, active Showa suspension movement, for me, a little bit soft. The shock itself is very unique feeling. Good rear wheel traction once I turn that high speed up, and it follows the ground really nice. So I think with that low shock spring rate and then with that linkage curve, it's going to give you guys a good feel on acceleration, which I personally like a lot because there's not a lot of traction here late in the day in Italy. A couple other things to note. On this frame, it looks like it's rubber, but it's not. It's plastic. I do think it looks slippery when you look at it, but gripping the bike itself feels really nice. Your boots can hook into these ridges. It's a very seamless motorcycle. I like the seat shape. It's very flat. The overall rider triangle is very Honda-ish. You hop on it and you feel good right away. Hydraulic clutch, Brembo brakes. The grips itself, I'm not a huge fan. One, I'm not a huge fan of the throttle pull. It's a little bit firm for me. Also, it is a full diamond grip, so they felt a little bit small. Again, just nitpicking, not a big deal. Pirelli tires, 110 rear, 1349 gearing. If you guys would like a little bit more snap, maybe try a 1350, but overall, you can probably go to a 120 rear. I think this bike could use it. And I think overall, this Ducati Desmo is already in that top 3-4 shootout range. Again, we'll have to get it back home and really dive deep with other motorcycles, but very controllable, balanced suspension once you work with that high-speed dampening feel on the shock. And then a chassis, undecided yet, easy to corner, doesn't vibrate. We're going to have to talk more about straight line stability, but overall, very fun bike to ride. I'm all about bikes that are easy to ride, don't have a lot of front side, and have a lot of traction. Once I'm out of that corner and you roll that throttle on, guys, there's a lot of rear wheel connectivity, and that rev, that spool up, it just keeps pulling, and it's a very nice, seamless feel. So if you can work smarter, not harder, that's what they say. This is kind of what this bike gives me when I'm out on the track today. Off cambers, hills, not an American specialty, but it led me to have a lot of fun here today. So initial impression, Ducati did a great job. A lot of passionate people within this product. Got to meet a lot of them here in Italy, and it's really nice to see how moto focused they are when it comes to these bikes. Look, there's a lot of on-road fans out there that watch these videos, but when you see guys come from a road race background into motocross, it's really cool. More bikes, the better, I think, especially when you are a moto fan. You have more options. $11,495. That's basically a factory edition. So it's not out of the realm of MSRP when you start looking at things. I think a lot of us were scared initially when Ducati announced they're coming with a bike. They're like, oh, it's going to be 20 grand. Well, that's not the case. $11,495. That's not a lot of money. I thought it was also cool, before we wrap this thing up, that Ducati back in the day is how they came up with that the color red. When they used to go racing cars back in the day, a very long time ago, all these cars were the same color. And once the cars got dirty, they couldn't tell the drivers of the cars apart. So they designated colors to countries when they went racing, and designated color for Italy was red. Hence the reason why Ducati is red. So I thought that was very interesting. And yeah, they're a sexy bike. It's hard to beat a red motorcycle. So when you have a bike that looks good and then performs as good as it looks, that's a win-win situation. So if you guys have any questions about this bike, Kris at KeeferInkTesting.com. That's my email. My door is cracked open. Just kick that thing in right there. I'm happy to help you guys out. And we'll have more information on this bike. Look for a technical breakdown of this motorcycle, to talk about the Desmo valve train, to talk about the Showa suspension, to talk about the blend of materials that are within the swing arm and the chassis. We're going to do a podcast. This is more just like what this bike is about. If you could, because I know I'm going to get this question, what is the Desmo like to ride, as well as what bike is closest to it? Look, it has more low end than a Kawasaki KX450. It has more mid-range than a KTM 450. It revs farther, I think, than all the other brands. If I could kind of blend this thing together, it's kind of like a KTM and maybe a little bit of a Triumph feel. Like it has more low end, I feel like, than the Triumph. KTM has a little bit more low in this, but for me, connection after I'm out of the corner, so far it's very similar to that in the Triumph, where it pulls very cleanly and there's a lot of connection to the rear tire. So like I said, I think it's in the ballpark. Fun engine to ride, and look forward to riding it more. Hopefully Ducati will have these in the States for us to ride soon. They said July in the dealerships, so look for this bike in the dealerships come July. And again, happy to help you guys out if you have any questions. Don't forget, 12 issues, $30. The Racer X magazine side, other things inside that magazine that you can't get on here online. So lots of stuff going on. Guess what? It's 2026 season already. This is a 2026 model. And what? We're not even in June and we're already here. So stay tuned for more 2026 bike breakdowns. And don't forget to go to KeeferInkTesting.com. On my YouTube channel, there's other stuff in there. And we'll be back in the States. More breakdowns for you right here, RacerXOnline.com. See ya.